Hi, I'm Jeff Gonzalez, president of Trident Concepts. Today I'm here with Brownells Daily Defense to talk to you about rifle zeroing procedures. So, you bought a new rifle, got a new optic, now it's time to sync those two together. This is called zeroing, and what that means is that I'm going to take this optic and take the elevation and windage settings to make sure that they align with the bullet's impact at a certain distance at a certain target. Now, that means that I have to select a range or the distance that I will zero at. There's a lot of different zeroing ranges. You have a 25 yard, 50 yard, 100 yard, 200 yard, and a 300 yard. So you'll want to research to figure out what is the best zero for your purposes. After that, we need to prepare to go to the range. And what that really means is that we're going to make sure that our rifle is ready to go. That means take the time to make sure that I've properly installed my optic, that it is secure, nice and tight. Any other features on the rifle I want to make sure are nice and tight. Then I want to make sure that I have enough ammunition to go out there to do this correctly. I also want to select how I'm going to support this rifle. You could shoot your zero unsupported, but it's not going to give you the most precise shot group. And that's what we're really trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve the tightest shot group possible to make the best corrections from there. So you could also go with another supported method, which I'm using a bipod here. This is a Magpul bipod. I could also use sandbags. I could use my range bag. I can use a shooter's block. I can use a couple of different things to help stabilize the rifle as I'm shooting, because what that's going to do is to help to mitigate the shooter error, which will then allow me to really focus on my shot groups being as precise as possible. Now, I need to also become very familiar with the procedures, the actual procedures that I'm going to use. There are really two recommendations here. You can either do a 3-round shot group or you can do a 5-round shot group. And I'm not a big fan of the 3-round shot group, mainly because if you throw one round, you really have to rely on those other 2 rounds being the best group possible. Whereas with a 5-round group, if I throw 1 round, I have 4 rounds to try to create the best shot group. So I favor that 5-round group a lot more. Now, the volleys of rounds that I'm going to fire will be dependent on a couple things. Is this a brand new optic? Is it something that I'm just reconfirming? If it's a brand new optic, you could probably expect about 3 to 5 volleys just to make sure that you've really got this dialed in. If you're just reconfirming, it's probably going to be 2 to 3 max. And what I encourage you to do is I encourage you to always confirm your zero whenever you go out to the range. If you're going to go to the range and shoot your rifle, even for just a couple magazines, take time to confirm your zero. You never know what could happen. There's a lot of things that could happen, and we'll talk about point of aim shift a little bit later. But once you've settled on your procedures, the most important thing that you take away is that you want to be as consistent as possible. And not just with the procedures that you use, but the method of shooting. So when I get behind my rifle in a good stable position, I want to make sure that I use the exact same position. So I want to make sure that I put the stock in the same spot, that my cheek weld is in the same spot, that I'm looking through the same spot, because that's going to help generate as much consistency as possible. And consistency is what leads to accuracy, because accuracy is nothing more than consistency. So once I have developed that level of consistency, it allows me to repeat my process, which will then help me to really evaluate my shot group. Now, once I have my 5-round shot group on the target, I'm going to go ahead and head down range. To make that simple on yourself, what I recommend is that you only load your magazines with 5. Once you've fired the 5 rounds, you safe the weapon, remove the magazine, inspect the chamber to make sure it's unloaded, and then you can walk down range or bring the target to you. Once you are ready to evaluate your target, you want to look at your shot group. And what you're really doing is you want to evaluate the distance from your point of aim. That is going to be your point of impact. And what I need to do is I need to measure the windage and elevation. Now, if you have both in error, you're going to want to pick one to make the corrections for. Trying to dial in both at the same time is problematic. So in my experience, it's easier to go ahead and work my windage first. So I'll go ahead and evaluate my windage. And in this case, I'm going to use it as an example. I'm 3 inches from my point of aim. I decided to use a 100 yard zero, and I'm using this aim point T2. So the corrective value of this aim point T2 is a 1/2 inch. So What that means is that at 100 yards, one click will move the bullet's impact 1/2 inch. So if I need to move 3 inches, what that means is that I'm going to have to dial in 6 clicks. Now, the other thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that I understand what direction to move the reticle. So if you're lucky, you'll have an optic that has that information on the optic, or in this case, it's in the cap that goes on the turret. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that I understand, okay, right is going to be counterclockwise. I'll go ahead and put this cap on the turret, and I'll make sure that I can dial in and feel and hear those clicks as I'm doing so. Once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and get behind the gun and repeat that process until I'm comfortable with the shift of point of aim, point of impact. And when those two join up, it is said that our rifle is zeroed. So when you go to make those corrections, the biggest mistake that we see is dialing in the corrections in reverse. So if I need to move the bullet's impact to the right, I accidentally dial it to the left. The second mistake that we see is not being precise in your measurements, kind of eyeballing it. And I really recommend that you be as precise as possible. And then the third mistake that we see is when people rush through their zero-in procedures, or they're not as consistent as they should be. So what could cause some point of impact shifts that would require me to go back out and re-zero? Well, pretty much any time you change something. If I move from shooting with a bipod to shooting with a sandbag, if I extend this stock, if I use different ammunition, all of that is going to have an impact on my zero, and I'm going to want to reconfirm just to be on the safe side. All right, so this information will hopefully be very valuable the next time you go out to the range to zero your rifle or reconfirm your rifle zero. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them down below. Until then, I'm Jeff Gonzalez. Take care and stay safe.